Well, that was Patrick Roberts on a previous loan when he was at Celtic. He's also been on loan at Fulham. He's on his way to Girona to go and play on loan there. You're very much involved. You're part of the loan team at Manchester City. So how many players out on loan at the moment?
With Patrick today, I think there's 17 players on loan. So come down from last year, there was, including Mangala and Joe Hart, there was 40 players on loan.
And what's your role with those loan players?
Well, obviously, there's the team of 9 of us that are dedicated to kind of manage their season, individually and collectively. We kind of have a select number of players we look after, and then we watch all their games and obviously critique them and set them targets throughout the season.
See them after the games and everything?
Not every game. We make a conscious decision and effort to visit them between the 9 of us once a month, so players get 2 or 3 visits per month. From the team that is looking after them, but we watch every game and obviously set targets. The players set targets themselves, and then we help manage them. And
what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of having such a big team managing that group of players?
Because they need it. These are Manchester City players, so they need guidance. And in the past, players go on loan, and you forgot about it until you come back in pre-season, which is not right. And as a young player, you need guidance. You haven't paved your way in the game yet, so you do need help managing situations. And as a youngster, I would have liked guidance in certain situations with managers, and when you're at the team and you want to understand why, where a manager might not give you the time of day or might say things to you. Everyone that's played the game knows you want to see the manager, you go in there, I'm going to say this. You come out, you said, oh, I should have said that. And that's what's happening, where obviously we're there to kind of be that safeguard for the player and help them have a conversation and understand how managers think.
So it's career advice. Is it also about, as much as they're going to have an attachment to the club they've gone out on loan to, about making them still feel that connection with Manchester City? They still feel like Man City players?
Because they're representing the club, but also
Could you not just play them?
Not always. But no, as I said, they are Manchester City players, and obviously they're aware of that, and there's a standard set by Manchester City that they have to abide by. So on the other side, we make sure they do abide by them rules.
Well, what do you think about the way that the loan system's working? You had, what, 40-odd Man City players out on loan last season. Chelsea, obviously, always the poster boys for this conversation. But is it a sensible way, do you think, to make sure that you have the best crop of young players available?
And plus, they're assets as well. They are assets to the club. I suppose that's why you go and watch them. I'm not sure how many of those players actually came through and got into the first team, but I'm sure that Manchester City would have made a lot of money in respects of the monies that they've made from
I think, but as a professional, you're aware of yourself, and you know not every player at every academy
is going to make it through,
at every academy is going to make it through to their first team. So Manchester City is no different. So we are aware that you might not make it into Manchester City, but there's a career in football.
The thing with it is, Kels, I was going to say, it's like even with someone like, let's say, like Bakayoko with Chelsea. You know, he's come across from Monaco, and you know, I mean, he was, you know, brilliant. So, you know, I still thought that £40 million was a lot. It didn't work out for him, but you've got to protect that asset still, because he's cost a lot of money. So instead of loaning him somewhere in the Premier League and it doesn't go well for him, you know, you loan him to Italy, he's out of the way, get his confidence back, come back. I'm not sure if they'll get 40 back for him, but they will get a return on it. It's the same as like the Kennedy who's gone to Newcastle. That's a perfect example. Like £6 million. You know, he's gone to Newcastle, and I know there's a little bit of problems with him with the comments he made about China. So they loaned him out to Newcastle. He had a half-decent season, finished the season really well. He's gone back again. And you're talking about somebody now that, you know, if he has a good season at Newcastle, for £6 million, he'll probably worth 3 times as much money now. So it's still protecting asset and still making money for the club. It's another income stream for me.
How do you develop your career as a footballer, as a player who's a Manchester City academy player who's come up through the ranks and then goes out on loan? It isn't the career path that if you go into Manchester City as a kid, you think, I'm going to work through the various age groups, and then I'm going to play at the Etihad in front of the City fans. That's your
goal, but your goal is not...
How do you develop as a player?
Because you need to go and manage different situations and be exposed to scenarios that you wouldn't be exposed to at Manchester City.
In under-23s games and stuff like that.
You're playing against the same group of players from 15 to 23 because you're all the same age. So when you get to the under-23s, you've been playing against the same bunch of players week in, week out for the last 5-6 years. So you go on loan, you play against men, and that develops anyone quicker than you think. Majority of the players do go to Holland due to the fact that their average age of their league being 23, 24. Right. So the natural progression from the under-23s would be to go to Holland, play against 23, 24-year-olds, but in front of 30 to 40,000 people, then come back. If you've done well, you come back, and then we'll see from there.
Is there an issue with stockpiling of players? Do you think it would be unfair to ask you? Well, OK, go on, then
because if you look at some academies now, I know Huddersfield have kind of discarded their academy because they've been funding it for so many years. I think Brentford do the same. They've been funding it for so many years. Minimal players have progressed through, so they're thinking, well, Man City have got X amount of players, Chelsea have got X amount of players. They're players that are not quite good enough for them. We'll take them because they might be good enough for us, and that's the kind of scenario we're trying to create as well. Not every player's going to play for Man City, but we can coach you and then you can filter down.
It's a good point because you look at Nathan Ake before he went to Bournemouth. He went to Bournemouth on loan from Chelsea, and then halfway through the season, he's doing very well. Halfway through the season, Chelsea got him back. He stayed for the rest of the season, and then the next they bought him for £20 million. That's a lot of money for a player that's. I don't know, would have played a handful of games for Chelsea's first team, but you'd have to say that's pretty good business if you could do that. And when you look at Manchester City, they've got players of that calibre. Chelsea obviously have, and that's why they're able to make money off of that, and the players maybe progress and go somewhere else.
When you talk to the players who do go out on loan, how do you deal with their frustrations? If you have someone coming through in a position, particularly if it's Manchester City, they want to go and win the Premier League title, they want to go and win the Champions League, they want to challenge on every front, and so they need instant success, and often they will go out and they will buy a player in that position. How do you deal with the frustrations of a player who may feel that they can't develop in the first team, they have to develop below that? Yeah,
well, when you go on loan, pretty much all the players that have been on loan, I've recognised that it's probably the best decision they've made because they go out there and exposed to first-team football and realise it's not as easy as it looks when you're playing for the 23s. You look at the first-team games when you're playing for the 23s and think, I can play that pass, I can make that tackle. But then you realise, can you do it in front of 45,000 when a majority of them fans might be booing you because they're not your fans? So they're exposed to all them elements, and then they realise, this is quite intense, and obviously say it's just a gradual progression, so hopefully they can manage themselves into the Manchester City first team.
Can you point to the success of the England team in the World Cup and look at the players who started for them?
Well, I think there's a case to say that most players have made their debuts in their teens, and pretty much all of them, barring Raheem Sterling, was in the lower leagues, Championship and below kind of thing. So there is a case to say that it is worthwhile going on loan and plying your trade against men, as so-called men in league football.
Is it almost going back a little bit to a more old-fashioned way of players coming through? In that, yes, they may be owned by a Premier League club, but their football is learnt through the lower leagues, and they make that progression. And
I think when you look at the amount of players in that list, the England list there, and you see how they've come through, it works. It does work, but it like Joleon said, that it depends on the player and the attitude of the player and how much he wants to. Because I don't know how hard it must be for them when you're at a big club already, and then you have to go out to a lesser club. You know what I mean?
Facilities,
facilities and everything what you've been used to. Then it comes down to the individual, and that is where the test comes, and that is where you find out, and that is why it's fantastic to see the amount of players that's got through there and are now playing for the national team, because they've obviously got the right attitude, and that's what it comes down to as well. You have the right attitude. When you go out on loan, it's not to have a laugh and a jolly up. It's to go out to actually, and you want to. And when you're playing against other teams, when you go to a lower league team or whatever it is, those players as well can look at you and see how you should react and how you are coming from a big club.
I'm not picking on Arsenal, but I remember the FA Cup game, was it last season, where Arsenal made multiple changes and they played Nottingham Forest and lost. But if you look at the teams, Nottingham Forest average age was younger than Arsenal, but before that game, all them Arsenal under 23 players would have been saying, I can play for Nottingham Forest, I can play for Arsenal. But then you go there and you realise it's not as easy as you think.
And they're learning valuable lessons along the way.